Welcome to Finding Holiness, where we delve into timeless Torah wisdom, revealing the sacred in everyday moments. Join us on a journey to elevate your spirituality and discover holiness in every aspect of life. I'm your host, Rabbi David Kadosh, and together, let's embark on a path of spiritual exploration. I hope you enjoy this next episode. Okay, Bruchim Habayim, everyone. Erev Tov. It's great to be back giving shiurim after a little Pesach vacation. I wouldn't call it a vacation for me because I gave a lot of shiurim over Pesach. But at least we get to sit down again and speak some Torah in, I guess, a less formal way. And the truth is, I was battling in my mind what to give this shiur on. You know, should I stick with the Parashat HaShavua, which is what the class is on? And certainly, without fail, Parashat Kedoshim, there is so much to talk about. Just a few moments ago, we were giving a small class on just two mitzvot that were so deep and so many important laws. But I decided to speak on Pirke Avot. And I'm hoping for the next few weeks, we'll talk a little bit about Pirke Avot. But before I get to that, we want to thank our generous sponsors of the shiur, Mr. and Mrs. Jack Ben Shimol, Mr. and Mrs. Leon Ben Shabo, who sponsored the shiur in memory of their mother, Rika Ben Shimol, Zichnai Bracha, who's Nachalaz this week. Thank you, Chazak Baruch. With the words of Torah, the lessons that we learned today, Bilu Nishmata, Tinafshat Torah Bitzror, Achayim, Amen. We are well aware of why we are studying Pirke Avot. This week is the second Perek. In fact, we already read Perek Rishon last Shabbat. Because this is the time where we gotta learn to be better Jews. We really need to learn to be better Jews, and that's a lifelong process. And every year we come back to these same Mishnayot, these same fundamentals. You know, it's almost like you're practicing in like Little League. You go to Little League, you took your little boy to Little League, or if you played Little League baseball, those times, the fundamentals. You know, start with the ground balls. You just learn how to catch the ground balls and throw on target. These are fundamentals. These are not, oh my gosh, I've never heard. These are basics on how to be a proper Jew. And they're so important. And often we forget. Why is this so? Because im en derech eretz in Torah. If there's no derech eretz, if we don't know how to behave with one another, then how can we accept the Torah 7 weeks from now, or 7 weeks from Pesach, on the Chag Shavuot, and Matan Torah. And of course, we are still mourning the students of Rabbi Akiva, 12,000 pairs of students, 24,000. I don't think people understand what that number is. Even though yesterday we had Yom HaShoah, 6 million people for sure don't understand what that number is. But, we just went through a tragedy of our own. I think we're at 1,500, 1,600, and everyone, you can't believe it. It's killing us. Right? Every soldier that dies, yesterday another 3. Every time we hear of a soldier dies, it tears us apart. Now this is 24,000 in 33 days, and of course every neshama is holy and pure. But these are the students of Rabbi Akiva. Like, these are of the greatest rabbis that you can imagine, and then times that by thousands. So this is who we're dealing with here. So of course it was a very unfortunate gezerah, and we are mourning because of that. And part of the tikkun is to study the Pirke Avot and like I said, be better. So we are on Perek Sheni. The truth is, if you look back at my shiurim, I've actually already given classes on Pirke Avot, and I've done 2-3 years I was giving classes. So in my notes, I'm just moving forward. So I'm not actually starting from the first Mishnah in Perek Bet. I'm actually starting from Mishnah Gimel, the third Mishnah, because I've already given a shiur. I started it during COVID. I didn't give last year on Pirke Avot, but if you go back on the YouTube channel, for those following on YouTube, you can find the shiurim on Pirke Avot, and they're all equally important. It's like, every Mishnah is different and contains a different message. So today we're going to be studying Mishnah Gimel on Perek Bet. So the third Mishnah in the second chapter. This is the Mishnah. I'll read it for you. Hevu zehirin barashut. Be careful with the government. hence today's topic. She'en mekarvin lo la'adam ela letzorech atzman. For they only befriend a person for their own needs. Nir'in ke'ohavin bish'at hana'atan. They appear to be friends when it's beneficial to them. Ve'en omdin lo la'adam bish'at tohako. But they do not stand by a person at the time of his distress. Sound familiar? Right? I get a lot of, everybody's like nodding their head. Okay? So you should know this is not just a modern day problem. This was something that was spoken about way back when. The author of this Mishnah is Rabban Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He himself was a Nasi. He learned from his father. He dealt with government his whole life because that's what the job of the Nasi was. He was a representative of Am Yisrael. He was a Gadol Ador. Everyone went to him for advice, and whenever there were situations that involved the security of Am Yisrael, they went to the Nasi. He was the person. So Rabban Gamliel was the guy who dealt with this, and therefore it's very befitting for him to say, watch out. Because when you think about it, and we're going to start on a very literal level, and then we're going to expand into other things. When you think about it, the whole purpose of the government is to please his constituents. That's what it is, to please the members of the party and of the people that they represent. But that's not what's taking place over here. It's not for the tzorech of the person, but the tzorech atzman. Governments like to please themselves and only themselves. It's for the benefit of the government. It's not about what I can do to for the people, but what I can do to stay in power. Because I want to stay in power. I want to be in control. I want to have authority and governance. I want to show that I'm in charge. And the proof is, look at government officials before elections, and then look at these same government officials after elections. So when you look at them before elections, they're going from town to town, and they're hugging people, and they're shaking their hands, and they're having coffee with them, and they're all their best friends, and this is what we're going to do, and this is this. And it really, really does make an impact, and a lasting impact on people because they need their votes. And all of a sudden, when they reach the level of power, such as a president or a prime minister or a king or a queen, then all of a sudden, it's like, excuse me, make sure you keep your distance. I'm here, you can't cross these lines. You have to talk to me with proper respect, or whatever it is. And that's the reality of it. And if you look throughout Jewish history, there were many, many times where leaders of governments, or whether the government didn't stand up for the Jewish people, or even the Jewish leaders themselves felt at odds with the members of the government, especially at times when the Jews needed help. Let's start with the Greeks. When the Greeks ruled ancient Israel a long time ago, their leader, Antiochus, the story of Hanukkah, tried to force a lot of Greek practices and observances on Israel, and a lot of the Jewish leaders, being afraid to confront Antiochus and not to lose their own power, they went along with it. And they were called Mityavnim. They were the ones who kind of made themselves Greeks because they didn't want to go against. And in the end, they didn't protect the Jewish community. The Greeks for sure didn't protect the Jewish community, and these people, Dafka, went against. It was all letzorech atzman. The Roman rules in Eretz Yisrael, not long after that, the Romans took control of Israel, and they were also mainly interested in building bridges and collecting taxes, so they didn't look out for the Jewish people. In fact, there's a very famous story, and one of the most famous stories that the Gemara brings down, of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. This is how the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai started, that there were three great Chachamim, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, and Rabbi Shimon, that were having a whole discussion about the Roman influence, and what the Roman does throughout their day, and they're talking. Rabbi Yehuda spoke very positively about the Romans. Yeah, look at the buildings, look at the palaces, look at the bridges and the tunnels, the waterways, everything. He was just praising the Romans. Rabbi Yosef kept quiet, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, "You crazy? These guys, everything they do is for themselves." Exactly what our Mishnah says over here. Everything is letzorech atzman. They only do it to please themselves. You think they care about us? They don't care about us. We all know the end of the story, that there was an informer listening to this conversation who went to go report it to the Romans. They gave Rabbi Yehuda some very nice position. Rabbi Yosef was sent in exile because he kept quiet. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had to go hide in a cave, for 12 years with his son. So that's how this went about. Well, maybe when we get to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's Hilulah, maybe we'll talk more about that story. But that's what it is. It's all letzorech atzman. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai realized that. So what do you think? You think when they build you a nice road, it's because, I want to do it for the people? They're saying that. But no, it's because they want to stay in power. Because look what I'm doing for you. And this continued on later on in history, the medieval times, when the Jews were living in the Muslim lands, during the Middle Ages. Communities in these countries, Jewish communities, often face a lot of mistreatment and unfair treatment, and Jewish leaders were trying to work a lot with the Muslim and Christian leaders to protect their people, but they couldn't always do what was right. Even in Europe, really not so long ago, there were Jews that were called court Jews. Court Jews were people they were like the representatives, usually wealthy Jews, that had connections to government officials. And, they helped their communities, but at the same time, they couldn't really butt heads with the government, the municipalities, because they would lose their positions. It would be displeasing to the rulers. So they couldn't always stand up for the Jewish people when they needed it. And often, it led to bad things. And when you lose protection, then you get Kristallnachts and you get pogroms and you get a lot of worse things. You look throughout history, the most famous example of this would be Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik was viceroy. He was second in command. Probably the highest ranking Jew of all time was Yosef HaTzadik in Egypt. And look what happened. We forgot. Shelo yadat Yosef, new Paro, forget Yosef, and let's just enslave everybody. All right. The Rav Don Yitzchak Abarbanel was one of the most amazing commentators on Chumash and Navi, and he was, they say, the chief finance officer, the CFO for the King of Spain, and he got exiled during the Spanish expulsion. All right, he was sent away. In the end of the day, it's all letzorech atzman. When you need them, when b'sha'at tochako en omdin lo, they're not there for you when it comes time. So we see examples how Jewish leaders, they had to deal with these governments that didn't always support them, didn't always protect them. And when you rely too much on the government, it becomes extremely risky because their priorities change. They change all the time. And or they might not be there when you need the help. And of course, modern day, the days that we live in, modern day democracies, where governments prioritize their own interests over the people, and whether it's policies that benefit elitists or the wealthy or the lower class, and then you're leaving the middle class hanging because they're always stuck paying the taxes. This stuff is not new to you. Everybody here is working class people or were in the workforce and know exactly what I'm talking about. And then you have time, sometimes during conflict or crisis, where the government will exact measures and policies that really, really jeopardize the liberties, the civil liberties of people. Okay? And it wasn't too long ago where we were in the COVID, okay? And then you saw what was going on. Everybody here saw what happened in Ottawa with the now known as the truckers, okay, coming all the way from British Columbia. And again, I'm not going to get political on who was right and who was wrong. I know who I side with, but I won't say that publicly. But what did the government do? Craziness, what they did. Freezing bank accounts? That's absurd. Absurd. And I will go on record for that. I don't care. It is absurd. And our government was criticized around the world for taking that action. Because how do you do something like that? But again, because it's nir'id ke'ohavim b'shanatan, all right, when it's beneficial, I'm your friend. But when it's not beneficial to me, and now all of a sudden you're shoving your truck in my face, now I'm going to show you. When it's shat tochako and I'm protesting because I want my civil liberties back, then you're going to see what I'm going to do. And then that's what happens. That's what happens. And it wasn't too long ago, here we are, with record high inflation. It's very difficult to live. It's very difficult to put food on the table, whether put gas in your car, pay your mortgage, and then you have, again, carbon tax, and then it's okay, we're going to do it. We're going to do it because we have to. Because we need to say, whatever it is, whatever fake information they're giving you to tell you that it's probably beneficial for you, in the end of the day, it's costing us money, okay? And it's tough. It's very difficult. So you see, in our own country, and just like this country, this happens everywhere. We just here live in Canada. But in reality, governments throughout history have acted this way that align with this Mishnah. And this is really not a big chiddush. Like I told you at the beginning, these are just fundamentals. So he's telling you, Hevu zehirin barashut. Be very, very careful of the government. Probably just best, to live your life quietly, peacefully. Don't bump heads with them or rub them the wrong way. However, I'm going to take this Mishnah on a different avenue. Because the Mishnayot were not written with punctuation or vowels. And I've done this before in my previous Pirke Avot class. Hevu zehirin barashut. Rashut means government. But the word rashut can also be read reshut. Reshut. Be aware of the reshut. Now, what is reshut? There's a lot of definitions to reshut. I'm going to branch out in a few ways. So, one explanation I saw that was beautiful by Rav Tversky in his Vision of the Fathers. He says, be careful of what is permissible to you. Something that you have reshut to do. Something that you're allowed. That's what reshut is. Permissible things. The more we get involved in things that are allowed, what are things that are allowed for us to do? It's usually, if not always, physical things, such as food and drink and sleep and pleasure. Things that we can enjoy is usually things that we're allowed to do. Now, there are rules to it. When I eat, I have to say a beracha. When I finish eating, I have to say a beracha. I'm not talking about that. But the permissible things, too much of it will bring you a lot of harm. They seem good when it's bishata na'atan. But then, all of a sudden, they come and they can really, really cause you harm. And you can take this to alcohol, you can take this to cigarettes. He talks about drugs because he was a psychiatrist who dealt with a lot of drug addicts. At first it's permissible. Be very careful when you have access to anything you want. He compares it to a constant fight of the Yetzer Hara. He says that the best mode of attack in any war is a preemptive strike. When the enemy doesn't know what's coming, and you do a preemptive strike. Like in 1967, right, boom, they come, they knock out the airplanes, they didn't see what was coming, and really gave Israel the upper hand in that war, and they won the war because of that. So we have to have a preemptive strike against the Yetzer Hara. We have to go to his territory. He wants to entice us to sin by eating too much, and over drinking and all these things. So, hevu zeirim barashut. Be proactive. Be careful for the things that you're allowed. So, you know what? I know this is how you're going to try to get me to sin, but hevu zeirim barashut. Be very careful when you do so. So, rashut, what is permissible to you? Others have a different way of explaining this, of obtaining permission. Hevu zeirin, make sure, beware of getting permission. What does that mean? When you work for the community, it is extremely important to get everybody involved. Baruch Hashem, I'm looking around, we have a lot of very, very good community members here and people that have been active in the community for many, many years. Get everybody on board. And then make it official. Get it on paper. Because a lot of times, you have an idea, and you share your idea with all the people, and by words, by speech, they're all with you. Oh, great idea. I love it. I'm with you. Yeah, And then, if something flops with the idea, those are the first people to say, I have no idea why that person did this. Right? Yeah, and they'll never admit it. And this is what happens, and then they'll go against you because they don't want to take blame. So when you want to do something, whatever it is you want to do in life, make sure you are on the same page with everybody, so that you rise and you fall together. Often, when you look at many times, there's many instances in the Torah when people did certain things that they did not have proper reshut to do. They certainly didn't have the haskama of Moshe Rabbeinu or other leaders, and they fell drastically. One of them that we spoke not long ago about in our own parasha Shavua class was Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aharon, who they felt rightfully so, and according to halakha, they were right to bring a fire, an earthly fire in the Mishkan, and the halakha says that there needs to be an earthly fire. But on that day, on the Chanukah Tamizbeach, that day, it was not to happen. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't happen. But they didn't ask Moshe. They just said, okay, here's a fire. And we're not here, we don't understand the level. Nadav, Avihu were on the level of Moshe and Aaron, some say even greater than Moshe and Aaron. Like that's how holy they were. But because they didn't ask permission, and they thought that they could do it on their own, the result was tragic and drastic, that the fire came and consumed them as a result of that. And that was a discretionary act. Why not just go get everybody on board? Moshe, do you agree with this? Now Moshe agrees, then you're good. The sin of the spies. Again, when Moshe Rabbeinu sends 12 spies, we're going to read about it in a few weeks. All right? You have people returning with a negative report. All right? Where was their fear of God? Remember, Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem didn't even agree to this. Hashem, multiple times in the Torah says, Moshe, you're the one to allow this. This whole spies thing to happen. You should have trusted me. But they went in, and they came back already with a preconceived notion that this land is not good for us. And then 40 years in the desert, on Tisha B'Av, until today we suffer on Tisha B'Av, all the calamities that took place of the Jewish people. Shaul HaMelech was instructed to destroy the Amalekim and everything, all their possessions. It was a divine commandment. And Shaul on his own decided, I'm just going to leave that guy alive and all the sheep. On his own. Why? Rahmanut. Why? What did the sheep do? The sheep, poor sheep. What do they do? What do they do? Okay, who are you to say what do you do? And because of that, we had a Haman and we had a Hitler. And we can imagine all of Amalek would have been gone had it not been for that decision of Shaul. Obtain permission before you do something. You had no permission to do so. Korach, another one. Korach, Datan, and Aviram challenged Moshe and Aaron's leadership. I should be the priest. He should be everyone wants their own position. It was a rebellion. And they didn't go and seek the proper sources. Last but not least was probably, I would say, again, these are just examples from Tanakh. Yerovam ben Nebat, which we spoke briefly this past Shabbat in Mesilat Yesharim. Yerovam ben Nebat, after the division of the kingdom was split into Yehuda and Israel in Sefer Melachim. So Yerovam, he was a king of Israel. He feared that the Jews would return to the Bet HaMikdash, to Bet David, if they continued to worship in Yerushalayim. So he decided, we're going to have new JCCs. Okay, we're going to put JCCs in different parts of the country. We don't want anybody going to the Bet HaMikdash anymore. We're going to have one in Dan. We're going to have one in Beersheba. We're going to have just not Jerusalem. His own decision. And we said actually on Shabbat that it may have even been the right decision, okay? But he did it out of jealousy because he didn't want people to go to Bet David. He was so jealous of David and Shlomo and their house. So he did it. And because of that, en lo chelek le'olam haba. Mishnah says Yerovam ben Nebat doesn't have chelek le'olam haba. So he makes these decisions. Obtain a hevu zeirin barashut. Be careful to obtain what you need. The authority of doing certain things. That's one way. So right now we've looked at three ways on how to translate the reshut. One, government. Two, what is permissible to you, reshut. And permission, which is also reshut. Okay? Now we're going to look at a fourth way. Reshut also means discretionary or optional. Optional. This means that we should be cautious about thinking that following Hashem's commandments or doing what is right is optional. Don't think that. Hevu zehirim. Be very careful to think that way. Meaning it's not just a message about politics. It's a reminder that we have duties, that we have responsibilities on this earth. And these are things that I can treat as, should I do them or should I not? But it shouldn't be that way. Because in Judaism, they are called mitzvot. They are called commandments. And there are commandments that are important for everyone, assuming that they apply to everyone. And some commandments only apply to Kohanim, and some only to Leviim, some to women, and some only to men. Okay, fine. But if they apply to you, then it's a commandment. When I serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu through tefillah, or through learning, or through doing avodat Hashem, good deeds, that's crucial. But when I start to think about, I like this, I don't like this, I'm going to start picking and choosing because I look at it as discretionary, I look at it as optional because it's to my benefit. B'shat hana'atan, you'll realize that when you need Hashem's help, b'shat dochako, it's not going to be there. If we only follow some of the commandments or parts of it when serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when it's convenient, then it loses the meaning. It loses the integrity of our religious life, our spiritual life. And instead of what's doing right because it's right, because Hashem told us is what we have to do, we might do it only because we think it's easy. Or what other people expect us to do. So what ends up happening? It weakens our religious practice. It weakens our relationship with Borei Olam, with God. That's one problem. Another problem, if we look at mitzvot as reshut, as optional, then we're forgetting that they come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're not just suggestions, right? Now we have to, whenever you write an email now, okay, you have to be very careful with how you word your email, right? I suggest, all right, with your permission. Right? You can't be too direct now because the other guy's going to get insulted. Okay, on the other end of the computer. That's where we live in today. Okay, so if I treat mitzvot as optional, then I think of them as suggestions. I suggest you do this. If not, you could do this. And if it doesn't suit me or doesn't fit my dress code, then I'm going to ignore it, and that undermines our emunah. It undermines our faith. It undermines our identity as Jews, as Yidden, as our fellow Ashkenazi brothers say. It suggests that my own opinion is more important than God's opinion, which is really against the core of Judaism. Because you're kofer. It's like I'm denying what do you care? What do you know, God? I don't care about what you have to say. That's problem 2. Then problem 3. You start treating mitzvot as if they're negotiable. And if mitzvot are negotiable, then it blurs the lines as to what is right and what is wrong. Because Jewish law also contains within it moral guidelines, clear moral guidelines. As much as a person might argue and an anti-religious person might argue whatever reason, shechita is cruel to animals, and you'll find in the end of the day, the Jews are the most moral people. If you follow the Torah, 100%, it is the most moral book on earth than anywhere else. And we might start making decisions what is convenient for us, like I said, or what is popular in society. And that leads to confusion. That leads to people feeling apathetic about religion and not wanting to take part in it and not wanting to feel what is truly important in their lives and the lives of others. It's number 3. And lastly, which arguably might be the most important, is that when you think of mitzvot as optional, that puts you in a situation where you are very, very vulnerable in your spirituality, in your ruchniut. You now face challenges and hardships, and everybody's got their challenges and hardships, and we don't have a foundation to rely on. It's brought down in so many places. You're suffering, the Yetzer Hara got you, you're sinning. The Torah is the tablin. The Torah is the remedy for the Yetzer Hara. That's how you beat it. That's how you fight it. You know, when it's difficult, find Hashem. Where do you find Hashem? You find Him in the Torah and the mitzvot. That's what, Torah kucha birichu Yisrael chadhu. It's one thing, oraita. So without a solid commitment to what's doing right, we struggle to find that comfort. We struggle to find that strength in our emunah. So here's just a few examples of what I'm talking about and what I'm referring to over here. Examples of discretionary mitzvot or selective observance, reshut, that can lead to negative consequences, both on an individual level and a communal level. Let's start with tzedakah. Tzedakah. We all know how important it is to give tzedakah. But what happens if the giving of my tzedakah is selective? I might choose to give a charity to who I feel is deserving, or to who I feel is convenient, while neglecting other ones which are also in need. Now, don't get me wrong. People feel a certain connection to certain organizations and others. Okay, and if I feel like I really like what this organization does, and I want to give a big chunk of my money, there's nothing wrong with that more than everybody else. But for a person to overlook somebody else, overlook a cause that needs assistance, and they say, you know what, I don't like the way you look, I don't like the way you knocked on my door, I don't like the way that you greeted me, I'm not sure if I agree with the political, and you start finding excuses, and I'm not going to give you. That's selective. You don't have to give him most of your maaser tzedakah money. But why should he be turned down? Do you have a valid reason? As far as I'm concerned, unless if you know the guy's a crook, a person deserves something. If he's coming to you and he's putting himself in that vulnerable spot to knock on your door and say, hey, please, can you help me? Right? You got to help. You got to give something. $5, 10, whatever it is, you give something. But to just say no, you were zocher. Remember, I know this is really going fast tracking to Megillat Ruth, but Ruth was very famous to saying, "Hachesed asher ani oseh imcha." I think that's the word. When Ruth collects tzedakah from Boaz, the way she words it is the chesed that I did for him. Remember that. Normally, you would think that the person giving the charity is doing the chesed to the other person. But that's not the way she says it, and it's not the way the mitzvah works. If you have an opportunity to do chesed, if you have an opportunity, to give tzedakah to someone else and knocks on your door, you have to know that God chose you to be that person. That lady or that man who needs tzedakah could have knocked on any other door in the neighborhood, but they chose your door. So they're doing you the chesed by giving you an opportunity to do mitzvah, and you're turning them down? Look what you're giving up. Shabbat. Partial observance of Shabbat, the Jewish day of rest. Another one where a lot of people, Hilchot Shabbat is so, oh my goodness. We spend a lifetime learning Hilchot Shabbat. So now, there are certain parts of Shabbat that everybody feels very connected to. It doesn't really matter what type of religious level you are. Almost, I would say, majority of Jewish households, maybe not majority, okay, many Jewish households will light Friday night candles. Many of them will sit down and have a Friday night dinner with their family. Okay, there is that element. And to that, Chazak u'Baruch, it's great. But you should know that you're fulfilling the Zachor, et Yom HaShabbat, the Kadeshot. That's the Zachor part. The dafina and the Friday night candles and the nice glass of wine and the brisket or the whatever. That's a zachor. But there's a shamor. Zachor v'zachor bedibur echad. It was said at the same time that there's this idea of Shabbat where, there's certain things there's many things we can't do on Shabbat. We forget about that. Do we forget about it, or do we choose not to adhere to them? And many people just choose. So this is like a discretionary. People are treating Shabbat discretionary. Okay, what do I like about Shabbat? I like candle lighting. I'll do that. I like chicken soup. I'll do that. I like Moroccan fish. I'll do that. And we'll sit as a family and we'll make sure we turn off our phones for 2 hours. Okay, but Shabbat's a 25-hour day. Right? There's a lot of things going on Shabbat. Right? And there's not a class on Shabbat, but I will vouch and go on record to say that a person that really keeps Shabbat kichata, there's no better day in the world. There really is no better day in the world. But we see this partial observance of Shabbat. Tefillah, conditional prayer. Praying when a person only feels he's inclined to pray, or when he has personal challenges, rather than something consistent. Now, we did speak the other day, actually, in our morning Shachrit service. I gave a halacha that according to all opinions, it's a mitzvah d'oraita to pray when you are in danger. If you are in a time of need, if you are in danger, then everybody holds it's a biblical mitzvah to pray. Otherwise, most hold it's only rabbinical. Except for Maimonides, Rambam holds that it's biblical. But everybody holds in times of need to do it. So some people, that's when they'll only pray, time of need. Or when someone's really sick. Or when you lost your job. And then, okay, now I'll open up a Tehillim. There's 3 tefillot every day. Shachrit, Mincha, Arvit. Let me tell you something. Gemara Masechet Shabbat has a discussion about Tfilat Arvit. It's a short discussion which ends up breaking up into a huge story. The discussion is whether or not Arvit is obligational, chova, or reshut. Reshut, that's the word it uses. Or is it discretionary? Do I have to pray Arvit, or do I not have to pray Arvit? And they bring, Abaye says reshut, Rava says chova, this one says reshut, this one says chova. The Gemara concludes that Arvit is reshut. Optional. Discretionary. That's how the Gemara concludes. Ve'ilcheta Arvit reshut. There's a whole story afterwards with Rabbi Yoshua and Rabban Gamliel, a very famous story, how Rabban Gamliel was ousted as Nasi, the same author of our Mishnah, in fact, okay, who held chova. Maybe that's what he meant. Hevu zeirim barashut. Be careful. He held chova. He goes, be careful of the people that said the rashut. Okay. So the Gemara concludes it's rashut. You open up the Rambam, and the Rambam is posek, Shulchan Aruch also. He says, even though Arvit is reshut, nahagu Yisrael to treat it as chovah. The Jewish people have now accepted upon themselves that Arvit is obligational. Why did he change it? It wasn't him. It was already from before him. Why did they change it? If they had the same Gemara that I'm looking at, who were the people and why did they say, I don't know who they were, but why did they go against the Gemara? Rarely do we see that. They should have just said, Gemara says Rashut. Okay, when I'm in the mood or when I could make it, I'll come to Arvit and I'll pray Arvit. If I can't, I'm too tired, I'll go to sleep. No one bother me. Shema I'll still say, because Shema is Shoch Bechav Kumecha, but the Amidah, fine, if I want to, I'll do it. Why did they change it? The answer is because you can't live a life of Rashut. You can't live a life of discretionary mitzvot. Or optional or not optional. Yeah?
Arif said, זה לא רשות, זה חובה, למה? Arvit כנגד יעקב אבינו. אז זה בחיר האבות, לא ניתן...
Okay, nice. Okay, yeah. זכות Yaakov Avinu, who was metaken Tfilat Arvit, so it makes it chova. Yaakov was the Bechir Avot. Yaakov was the Bechir. He was the choicest of the fathers. But you could see the rabbis felt we can't leave this. We can't just give people freedom. Yes, one day no. Because then you got all these problems that we mentioned. that you're risking happening. So mitzvot cannot be reshut. Kashrut, another one. You know what? I will keep kosher at home. I cannot tell you how many times I've encountered people, and like I try to not be judgmental, and I respect everybody. I just don't understand what that means. I don't understand what it means that I'm kosher at home, but I'm outside. I'm not. I don't know. If someone try to explain to me, and I'm going to give them due merit where it's deserving. Chazaku Baruch for being kosher at home, because it's better than not being kosher at home. Okay? But if you feel that it's important to be kosher at home, then be kosher outside. So why are you not kosher outside? Because you want to impress friends, or your friends are maybe not Jewish, or totally not observant, and you don't want to make it awkward. That's usually probably the reason. I'm assuming that's the reason. So then your whole religion becomes discretionary. It's whatever feels good for me. B'shat hana'atan. When it feels good for me, then I'll do it. Then I'll follow it. But when it doesn't, leave me alone. And we see this over and over and over again. When it comes to our acts of kindness and compassion, what is the expectation? What do people expect from me to do? Then I'll do it. But I'm not going to show too much empathy. I'm not going to be too giving or too much compassion. Rabotai, this is, I believe, what Rabban Gamliel is saying over here. Hevu zehirin barashut. Of course, there's a government issue. That's the main letter of the law. That's what he was referring to. But the reshut has so much more to it. You cannot treat your religion as just something that when I feel like doing it, I'll do it. She'en mekaravin lo le'adam. That's not going to bring you closer. En mekaravin lo le'adam. Ela letzorech atzman. It's egotistical. It's selfish. It's sorech yourself. I'll be kosher at home only when my kids are looking, and then when they're not looking, maybe I won't. Nirin ke'ohavin b'sh'at hana'atan. It seems that Judaism is this beautiful rose and bouquet of flowers when it's beneficial to you. When push comes to shove, at the end of the day, these things are not going to stand for you. What is going to be your merit after 120 years? What is going to be your sanegor? What's going to be your defender? Who's going to be your defenders? Your mitzvot are your defenders after 120 years. You want a mitzvah that is diluted? You want a tefillah that was optional? You want a chesed that you didn't? You want a tzedakah that only because you like that guy and you didn't like this guy? It doesn't work that way. So a very, very simple mitzvah has such profound relevance and importance. B'ezrat Hashem, again, we should find that koach within us, as I always say, to be zahir barashut, to be careful of this concept, so that we should see and treat our beautiful, wonderful, incredible religion of Torah and mitzvot the way that it should be, and give it the proper respect, and through that we'll be zocheh to Yeshua nechama. Amen. B'menabi amenu.